The war had lasted for decades, and every battle had only led to more destruction. The HFY Alliance, once a powerful union of peaceful alien races, was now on the brink of collapse. Their fleets, once proud and vast, had been shattered, their strongest warriors defeated, and their planets burned to ash. The enemy was merciless. The Dominion, a race that knew nothing but conquest, had swept through the galaxy like an unstoppable storm, leaving nothing but ruin in its wake. Every species that had tried to resist had been crushed, their worlds either enslaved or erased from existence. One by one, entire civilizations fell, their distress signals fading into the cold void of space. Hope had become a rare thing, spoken only in whispers, and even those whispers were fading. Now only a handful of free worlds remained, and they were barely holding on. The Dominion had set their sights on HFY Prime, the heart of the Alliance, and if it fell, the war would be over. There would be no survivors, no more resistance, only silence. The leaders of the Alliance gathered in their final war council, their faces heavy with the weight of inevitable defeat. They had no ships left to send, no armies strong enough to hold the line. The enemy was coming, and there was no one left to stop them. Desperation filled the chamber as they considered the last option, one they had ignored for far too long. There was one species they had never called upon for aid, one power in the galaxy they had underestimated. Humanity. For centuries, the humans had remained distant, watching as the war unfolded but never interfering. The HFY had believed them to be an emerging race, technologically advanced but untested in war. No one knew the full strength of their military, and some doubted they had the will to fight a war that was not their own. But now, with extinction at their doorstep, there was no choice. The last signal was sent, a desperate call into the void, begging for help from the only force left that could possibly turn the tide. For hours, there was silence. The message had been sent, but no response came. Some among the HFY believed it had been a mistake, that humanity would not answer, that they would choose to remain hidden in their own corner of the galaxy, watching as the Alliance was wiped from existence. And then, just as hope was slipping away, a reply arrived. The words were simple, direct, and carried a weight that sent shivers through every being that heard them. Hold the line. We are coming. The War Council sat in stunned silence. There was something about those words, something that felt different from all the false promises of other species who had tried to resist the Dominion and failed. Humanity had not asked for negotiations, had not questioned whether the battle was worth fighting. They had simply declared their intent. And the way they said it made it sound less like a reassurance and more like a warning not for the HFY, but for the Dominion. Across the galaxy, the Dominion fleet moved forward, preparing for their final assault on HFY Prime. Their warships, monstrous machines of destruction, cut through space like hungry beasts, eager to deliver the killing blow. The HFY knew that even with humanity's promise, there was no guarantee of survival. No one had ever stopped the Dominion. No fleet had ever stood against their full power and lived. But as the enemy ships entered the system, something changed. Space itself seemed to shift, a ripple in the void. And then, from the darkness beyond, the first human warships emerged. They did not arrive in scattered groups or in desperate formations like the Alliance forces had. They arrived in perfect unity, in such numbers that they seemed to stretch across the horizon. A fleet larger than anything the HFY had ever seen, bristling with weapons, shields, and technology beyond their understanding. And at the heart of this armada was something even more terrifying, the Titan's Wrath, a battleship so massive that it eclipsed the stars behind it. It moved with the slow, deliberate power of a beast that knew no fear, its armor thick enough to withstand the fire of entire fleets. The Dominion had crushed countless species, burned entire worlds, and broken the spirit of civilizations. But for the first time in the war, they hesitated. For the first time, they faced an enemy that did not run. As the first Dominion warships opened fire, streaks of energy cut through the void, but the human fleet did not waver. Their shields absorbed the attacks, their ships holding formation as if they had been waiting for this exact moment. Then, humanity struck back. The counterattack was not just powerful, it was devastating. Dominion ships that had survived countless battles, that had annihilated fleets without effort, now found themselves crumbling under the sheer force of human firepower. Their strongest vessels were torn apart in seconds, their formations shattered before they could even react. The Exilari watched in stunned silence. They had expected help, but they had not expected this. Humanity did not fight like the other races. They did not rely on desperate last stands or hopeful defenses. They fought with ruthless precision, with the cold efficiency of a species that had spent centuries perfecting the art of war. The battle had only begun, but already the tide was shifting. The Dominion, once the unstoppable force that had swept across the galaxy, was now facing something it had never encountered before, an enemy that would not just fight back, but one that was prepared to end them. And as the Exilari watched humanity's armada move like a storm, one thought echoed through their minds. The war was no longer just about survival. This was something else. This was retribution. The skies above Exilari Prime were filled with chaos. The last remaining ships of the Exilari Alliance drifted in the darkness, their hulls scarred and weapons running low on energy. They had fought as best they could, but the Dominion fleet was unstoppable. Wave after wave of enemy warships poured into the system, their massive dreadnoughts leading the charge, while smaller attack ships swarmed the remaining defenders like hungry predators. The planet below, home to billions, was silent, its people watching in horror as their last line of defense crumbled. They knew the truth there would be no surrender, no mercy. The Dominion never left survivors. Every planet they conquered was either enslaved or burned to ash. And now, Exilari Prime, the last stronghold of the Alliance, was about to fall. The Exilari commanders knew there was nothing more they could do. Their ships were outnumbered, their weapons nearly depleted, and their forces scattered. The distress signal had been sent, but they had no illusions. They had called out to humanity, but no one believed help would come in time. The Dominion had never lost a battle. No one had ever been able to stop them. And then space itself seemed to shift. A ripple in the void, a disturbance so massive that even the Dominion warships hesitated. At first, the Exilari thought it was some new weapon, another horror unleashed by their enemy. But then they saw them. Shadows moving against the stars, dark shapes emerging from the emptiness. And then, light. Thousands of glowing engines ignited at once, illuminating the void with a terrifying brilliance. They came in formation, a wall of steel stretching across the battlefield, moving with the precision of a force that had prepared for this moment long before the war had even begun. Humanity had arrived at the center of this unstoppable force was the Titan's Wrath, the largest warship ever seen in the history of the known galaxy. It was not just a battleship, it was a fortress, a floating world of steel and firepower, armed with weapons so powerful that they could shatter moons. The ship was surrounded by dreadnoughts, cruisers, and destroyers, each one bristling with weapons, their shields glowing like an unbreakable barrier. And yet, it was not their size that struck fear into the Dominion, it was the way they moved. There was no hesitation, no panic, no sign of desperation. This was not a last-minute defense. This was an execution. Humanity had not come to defend Exilari Prime. They had come to destroy the Dominion. For a brief moment, the battlefield fell silent. The Dominion, arrogant and undefeated, hesitated. They had never faced humanity in open war. They had heard of them, seen their colonies on the edges of the galaxy, but they had never considered them a threat. And yet, as the human fleet stood before them, unmoving, unshaken, they felt something they had never felt before: uncertainty. The Exilari, still struggling to comprehend what they were witnessing, barely had time to react before the first human attack began. The Titan's Wrath fired the first shot. A single beam of energy, burning like the heart of a dying star, erupted from its main cannon. It struck the Dominion's frontline battleship, the Ravager, a vessel that had conquered dozens of worlds and destroyed entire fleets. It had never known defeat. But in a single moment, it was gone. The blast ripped through its shields like they were nothing, carving straight through its core. There was no explosion, no debris, just instant annihilation. The Dominion's greatest warship had been erased from existence before it could even fire a shot. Then, the rest of the human fleet opened fire. The darkness of space was lit up with streaks of energy, missile trails cutting through the void like a storm of fire. The Dominion tried to react, tried to return fire, but it was already too late. Their formations crumbled as human warships moved like hunters, their weapons striking with deadly precision. Every Dominion ship that tried to regroup was torn apart. Their dreadnoughts, which had once seemed invincible, were reduced to burning wreckage. Their smaller attack ships, so used to swarming and overwhelming their enemies, found themselves outmatched by human destroyers, their movements anticipated before they could even strike. It was not a battle. It was a massacre. The XLR, still reeling from what they were seeing, barely had time to register the transmissions coming from the human fleet. Their communications were calm, controlled, and unwavering. There was no desperation in their voices, no panic. They spoke in short, direct orders, as if everything was happening exactly as they had planned. They did not see the Dominion as a nightmare, as an unstoppable force. They saw them as an opponent, one they intended to crush completely. The Dominion, realizing that they had underestimated humanity, began to retreat. Their commanders, who had once spoken with such confidence, now screamed for reinforcements. They had never known fear before. But now, as their forces were torn apart, they understood what it meant to face an enemy stronger than themselves. Then, from the depths of the Dominion fleet, their last hope emerged. The Harbinger, the Dominion's greatest warship, a moon-sized dreadnought armed with weapons capable of destroying entire planets, moved into position. Its energy core began to charge, preparing to unleash destruction unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. If it fired, HFY Prime would be gone. The battle would be meaningless. No fleet, no matter how powerful, could stop a weapon of that magnitude. The Dominion still had a chance to turn the tide. But humanity did not falter. They did not retreat. Instead, they moved forward. The Titan's Wrath and its escorts adjusted their formation, aligning for a coordinated assault. The human commanders gave their orders with chilling precision. Their voices carried no fear, only purpose. They had already calculated the outcome. They had already decided the fate of the Harbinger. And as the battle reached its climax, one undeniable truth became clear to the entire galaxy: humanity had not come to defend. They had come to conquer the war itself. The battlefield was a storm of fire and destruction, but humanity did not falter. The wreckage of Dominion warships drifted through the void, burning, broken, and lifeless. The once mighty fleet that had crushed entire civilizations was now struggling to hold its ground. Yet, in the heart of the chaos, the Dominion's last and most powerful weapon, the Harbinger, loomed like a dark god above the battlefield. The massive warship was more than just a battleship. Its superweapon, a core-powered annihilation cannon, was charging, its energy pulsing like the heartbeat of a dying star. If it fired, HFY Prime would be wiped from existence, along with everything on it. The humans had already decimated the Dominion fleet, but now they faced a final test. Could they hold the line against the most powerful warship ever built? The Dominion fleet, though shattered, was not entirely broken. The surviving warships rallied around the Harbinger, forming a desperate defensive ring. They were battered, their weapons damaged, their shields flickering, but they fought with a desperate fury. If the Harbinger could fire, the battle would turn in their favor. It was their last hope. The HFY, watching from their battered ships, could do nothing but wait. Their forces were too weak, their weapons nearly depleted. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and now all they could do was trust the one force in the galaxy that had defied the Dominion humanity. And humanity did not disappoint. As the Harbinger prepared to fire, the Titan's Wrath moved forward. It was not alone. The entire human fleet shifted into position, forming an unbreakable wall between the superweapon and HFY Prime. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. They placed themselves directly in the path of destruction, their shields glowing with defiance. The HFY commanders watched in disbelief. No species had ever done this before. Every other fleet had run, had scattered, had fought desperately for survival. But humanity had done something different. They had chosen to be the shield. They had chosen to stand in the way of annihilation itself. The Dominion did not wait. The remaining warships surged forward, launching everything they had at the human blockade. Energy blasts, missile barrages, and kinetic projectiles rained down on the human fleet like a relentless storm. The void was filled with fire, with explosions so bright that they could be seen from the planet below. But the human fleet held. Their shields flared under the impact, their armor cracked, their ships trembled under the force of the attack. Yet they did not break. They fought back, their weapons striking with deadly accuracy. Every Dominion ship that tried to break through was met with overwhelming firepower. Destroyers weaved through enemy formations, launching precision strikes that turned enemy cruisers into debris. Human battleships unleashed their full arsenal, hammering at the Dominion's defenses with ruthless efficiency. The Titan's wrath absorbed entire barrages without faltering, its counterattacks tearing through the Dominion's final line of defense. And still, the Harbinger continued to charge its weapon. The Dominion commanders, desperate to fire before it was too late, redirected all power to the superweapon. They knew that their fleet was being torn apart, that humanity was overpowering them in every way. But if they could fire just once, if they could unleash the cannon's full energy on XLR Prime, the war could still be won. The energy in the ship's core reached critical levels, and a deep, ominous hum filled the battlefield. The XLR braced for the end. The human fleet held their ground. And then, the Titan's wrath made its move. With precise coordination, the massive warship surged forward, breaking formation. Its engines burned like twin suns, propelling it straight toward the Harbinger. The Dominion commanders barely had time to react before the Titan's wrath unleashed its ultimate weapon. A single, devastating beam of energy, more powerful than anything seen before, lanced out and struck the Harbinger's core. The impact was instant, the effect catastrophic. The Dominion's greatest warship shuddered as its shields failed, its armor splitting apart under the sheer force of the attack. The energy core, unstable and overcharged, cracked. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the Harbinger detonated. The explosion was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A blinding wave of energy erupted from the shattered warship, consuming everything in its path. The shockwaves spread through the battlefield, tearing apart Dominion ships caught too close. Wreckage scattered in all directions, burning fragments of the once invincible war machine drifting aimlessly into the void. The Dominion fleet, already in ruins, was utterly annihilated. What few ships remained turned and fled, their commanders no longer willing to face the force that had destroyed their strongest weapon. The war, for the first time, had shifted. The XLR, still recovering from the shock of what they had just witnessed, could hardly believe it. The Dominion had seemed invincible. Their fleets had conquered entire empires, had burned worlds without resistance. And yet, here they were, fleeing. Running. Their greatest weapon destroyed. And it was because of humanity. As the battlefield fell silent, a message was transmitted from the Titan's wrath to the remaining XLR fleet. The voice was calm, unwavering, carrying the same quiet confidence that had been there from the beginning. The line is held. XLR Prime is safe. The war is not over, but today, the Dominion has learned what it means to face humanity. We do not run. We do not surrender. And we do not lose. The message echoed through every surviving ship, through every communication channel across the system. The XLR, exhausted and broken from years of war, felt something they had not felt in a long time: hope. They had called for help, and humanity had answered. But they had not just fought. They had stood between destruction and the helpless. They had chosen to be the unyielding shield against the darkness. And now, for the first time in history, the Dominion was afraid. The Dominion had been dealt a crushing blow, but the war was far from over. The destruction of the Harbinger had shattered their morale, yet the Dominion High Command was not willing to accept defeat. In the darkest corners of the galaxy, they gathered the remnants of their once unbeatable armada, rallying every warship, every soldier, every last reserve they had left. If they failed now, the entire Dominion would collapse. Their grip over the galaxy would be broken forever. There was only one course of action left, one final, desperate attempt to reclaim their dominance. And so, with their last fleets assembled, they launched a full-scale assault on HFY Prime. This was not just another battle. This was their last stand. Humanity and the HFY had little time to prepare. The Dominion forces arrived in terrifying numbers, more warships than anyone had thought possible. Their remaining dreadnoughts, battleships, and carriers formed an unbreakable wall of destruction, blotting out the stars as they advanced. Swarms of fighters, faster and more lethal than before, moved in perfect coordination. The Dominion had learned from their mistakes. They had underestimated humanity once, but now they attacked with ruthless precision, striking before the defenders could regroup. The first wave hit hard. Solari defense stations, already weakened from previous battles, were obliterated within moments. Human warships, still repairing from the last fight, were forced into immediate combat. The battlefield turned into a firestorm as explosions lit up the void, ships breaking apart under the sheer force of the Dominion's assault. Humanity had arrived as saviors, but now they stood as the last hope against extinction. But even as the Dominion pushed forward, the Titan's wrath, though scarred from battle, took command of the defense, moving with calculated precision. Human cruisers formed layered defensive lines, their cannons unleashing relentless waves of fire. Destroyers weaved between enemy formations, breaking their coordinated attacks. Battleships absorbed the brunt of the assault, their shields flaring under impact but refusing to collapse. The Dominion had brought overwhelming numbers, but humanity fought like a force that could not be defeated. They did not retreat. They did not hesitate. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot knew what was at stake. There was no surrender. The HFY, inspired by humanity's defiance, rejoined the battle with renewed strength. Their ships, though outmatched, worked in perfect unison with human forces, using their agility and advanced targeting systems to strike at weak points in the Dominion's formations. What had once been a desperate defense turned into a brutal counterattack. The Dominion, expecting an easy victory, found themselves locked in a war of attrition, unable to break through the combined resistance of humanity and the HFY. But the Dominion was not finished. From the depths of their fleet, their last great warship emerged, the Doombringer, an ancient relic of war, armed with planet-killing weaponry and surrounded by a personal fleet of elite warship. It was their final gamble, their last hope of victory. As it moved into position, its weapons charged with the power to wipe out HFY Prime in a single blast. If the Doombringer fired, the war would be lost. The human fleet knew they had only one chance. The Titan's wrath, already damaged, led the charge, pushing through the chaos of battle straight toward the Doombringer. It was suicide. No warship had ever survived a direct assault on a Dominion super dreadnought. But the humans did not care. They had made their choice. They would stand between destruction and the innocent, no matter the cost. As the Titan's wrath approached, the Doombringer turned its full arsenal upon it. Wave after wave of energy blasts, torpedoes, and kinetic strikes rained down on the massive warship. Its shields flickered, its hull cracked, but it did not stop. Human escort ships moved with it, intercepting fire, sacrificing themselves to protect the flagship. One by one, they were torn apart, but they had bought enough time. The Titan's wrath reached the Doombringer and unleashed its full firepower. A concentrated energy blast, fired directly into the Doombringer's core, struck with devastating precision. The Dominion warship trembled as its systems overloaded, flames bursting from its shattered hull. The Doombringer's weapon, seconds away from firing, exploded in a chain reaction. The entire ship was consumed in a massive detonation, the shockwave spreading across the battlefield. The Dominion fleet, seeing their final weapon destroyed, panicked. Their formations crumbled, their commanders lost control. Some tried to fight, others attempted to flee. But humanity was not finished. The Titan's wrath, barely holding together, gave the final order: no mercy. The human fleet pressed forward with unrelenting force, hunting down every last Dominion warship. The HFY joined them, ensuring that their enemies would never rise again. What had started as a last stand for humanity became a total annihilation of the Dominion's final forces. Their empire, once the greatest in the galaxy, collapsed in a single day. As the last enemy warship fell, silence filled the battlefield. The stars, once hidden by fire and destruction, were visible once more. Celery Prime was safe. The war was over. And for the first time in history, the galaxy knew what true power looked like. Humanity had not just fought. They had stood as the shield against destruction. They had defied the impossible. And they had won. But even in victory, they knew one truth: their war was not over. The Dominion was finished, but new threats would always rise. And when they did, humanity would be ready. For they were no longer just another species. They were the unbreakable force, the legend whispered across the stars. And in the darkest moments of the future, when the galaxy called for help, one name would always be remembered: humanity. Wreckage from the Dominion fleet drifted lifelessly through space, broken husks of what was once the most feared armada in the galaxy. Fires still burned on shattered warships, debris floating endlessly in the void. The Dominion had fallen. Their final assault had been crushed. Their strongest weapons had been destroyed. Their empire, which had once ruled the stars with terror, was no more. But even in victory, the weight of war remained heavy. Humanity and the Exilari had won the battle, but the cost had been great. Thousands of ships lay ruined, millions of lives lost in the struggle. And yet, something had changed. The balance of power in the galaxy had shifted forever. Humanity had arrived as an unknown force, a mystery to the other species. Now, they were legends. The Exilari, who had once thought their fate was sealed, looked upon their human allies with awe and gratitude. No species had ever stood against the Dominion like this. No fleet had ever dared to defy them so completely. But humanity had not just fought. They had stood. They had refused to break, refused to surrender. They had placed themselves between annihilation and the innocent, even when the odds had been impossible. And in doing so, they had done something no one had thought possible. They had turned the tide of history. As the surviving Exilari ships regrouped, their leaders sent a message to the human fleet. It was a simple statement, but it carried the weight of 1,000 battles, 1,000 years of suffering. We owe you our existence. From this day forward, humanity will never stand alone. It was more than just words. It was a promise. A bond forged in the fires of war. The Exilari, once proud and independent, now saw humanity as their greatest ally. And they were not alone. Across the galaxy, species that had once cowered in fear of the Dominion now looked to humanity with hope. They had proven that the impossible could be done. That no force, no empire, no enemy was truly invincible. But even as the celebrations began, the leaders of humanity knew one truth: the war was not over. The Dominion had ruled for centuries, spreading their power across countless systems. Even with their fleets destroyed, their influence still remained in the shadows. Loyalist factions, hidden bases, scattered warlords, there would always be remnants, waiting for their chance to rise again. The war had been won, but the real battle was just beginning. In the heart of the Titan's wrath, Admiral Rain stood before the massive strategy table, the glowing holographic display showing the fractured remains of the Dominion territories. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with determination. He knew what had to be done. Humanity could not stop now. They had turned the tide, but they had to push forward before the enemy could recover. The surviving Dominion forces had already begun retreating into deep space, regrouping in unknown locations. If they were allowed to rebuild, another war could begin. And next time, the Dominion would not make the same mistakes. The decision was made. Humanity would not wait for the enemy to return. They would strike first, hunt down every last remnant, ensure that the Dominion never rose again. The fleet would move beyond Exilari Prime into uncharted space, chasing down the last shadows of their enemies. The war would not end with a single victory. It would end only when every last Dominion threat was erased from the stars. And so, the fleet moved once more. The Excelari, their strength returning, pledged their forces to the cause. Other species, inspired by what they had witnessed, began to rally behind them. The war that had once been a desperate struggle for survival had now become a crusade for freedom. The galaxy had lived in fear for too long. Now, for the first time, it had hope. As the human fleet prepared for its next mission, a final transmission was sent out across the stars. A warning, a declaration, a message that would be remembered for generations to come. Humanity does not conquer. Humanity does not seek war. But if any power rises to threaten the innocent, to enslave the weak, to rule with terror, know this: we will be there. We will stand, and we will not fall. The war had changed everything. The galaxy had seen what humanity was capable of. And now, it would never be the same again. This was not just a victory. It was the turning point. The moment when history itself shifted. The moment when humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as the unbreakable shield against the darkness. And in the silent void, where once the Dominion had ruled, a new legend began. The legend of the species that had stood when all others had fallen. The legend of the unyielding defenders. The legend of humanity.